The following content is brought to you by MYND Initiative Incorporated. The opinions expressed in the following conversation are of the hosts and do not in any way represent the opinions of MYND Initiative as a whole. Some themes in this series may be distressing or triggering for some listeners, and so viewer discretion is advised. If any of the content does trigger uncomfortable feelings or cause distress, we encourage you to reach out to us via our Facebook page or seek further support from beyondblue.org or contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 for 24/7 over-the-phone support. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we all stand, and we extend our respect to the elders, both past and present.
Good evening, everyone. It is Does It Mess With Your Mind? And tonight I'm joined by my co-host, Hashida. Hashida, how are you tonight?
Hey Jason, doing great. How are you?
I am very well. It's nice to have you on board. How do you think you'll go as a co-host of Does It Mess With Your Mind? Excited?
I'm excited, and the pleasure's all mine. As usual, I'm excited about just talking about how I feel and, in general.
So you brought up the topic of burnout. You'd like to talk about burnout. And burnout itself, the definition is a special type of work-related stress, a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that also involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and a loss of personal identity. Why do you think physical or emotional exhaustion at work can lead to a loss of identity?
I wouldn't say physical. See, I've experienced burnout in the past. Okay, so I'm going to talk from my experience, not coming from any professional background here. So I'm just going to talk about what I've experienced in the past. There's a lot of, the reason I know what burnout is, and I've experienced it, is people are talking about it these days a lot. And from what I know, it is a lot of focus is on occupational burnout. And I mean, I've read the symptoms, and I know that I've experienced it in the past. So one of the things I felt is one is falling sick, feeling tired all the time, and no explanation for how you feel, headaches, and not wanting to. Even simple thing, getting out of bed is a huge task, and then something you're passionate about. I was very passionate about my job. I still am. It's a different thing to now, but this is in the past. I used to be very, very passionate about my job, and I found it difficult to, go to work every day. The only thought I had in my mind is, oh, it's going to be the same thing again, and that's not me. And then the feeling that I'm not good enough, or another thing that the way it manifested in me is whatever stress at work was fine. I would deal with it. I would have all those pent up feelings inside, and then I come back and take it out on my family. So these are like classic signs of burnout. Then another thing that I've experienced is cynicism. I became very cynical. So all those things that I read about it, I mean 16, 17 of them that I read about, I could check mark each one of them. And I eventually quit my job, a job that I loved doing, and that I held on for like 5, 6 years. I quit my job, and this is after I tried out every different version of the job. I moved across. I moved from from IT project management. I tried pre-sales. I tried. I tried pretty much everything that's there to see if that would help. I even took a small break, a short break, unpaid break, to see if that would change how I felt about my job, but that didn't. And then I eventually ended up quitting and staying at home for a while. I know that's now that it was classic burnout, and it is occupational burnout. I know exactly what you asked me right now. But it's been a journey.
Well,
Oh, it's been a journey.
that's fine. So one of the things that you just mentioned there was like you tried all of these different things. Now, I've been going through a stressful period at the moment, and I had a chat with a psychologist today. And one of the things that we were talking about is I was internalizing a lot of my own chatter. And instead of asking for help, I was just remunerating within my own head. Do you feel like during that period, because you didn't exactly know it was burnout, you were finding out as you were going through it, do you think that you were replacing the communication you had with other people about stress and that loss of liking the work that you're doing with just having chatter in your head and too much noise in your head?
Uh, I wouldn't say it was exactly chatter. I've done chatter, okay, but that's on a personal front where I have had conversations in my head, or I don't know, for hours and hours and hours of conversations. And when I actually meet that person or another person, right, I'm still having conversations in my head, instead of talking to the person. So that I've been in that situation. But with work it is slightly different. I'd get a little annoyed for small things, and even simple things, right? An email, the way you read the tone of the email is a little different. That's how I experienced it. Not particularly, I'm a girl at the end of the day, so I express myself. So I have friends. I can, I can go and bitch about how I feel. So that's what I would do. And one point in time, I realized, I had this conversation, and I realized that there isn't a thing I haven't bitched about, and there is nothing nice that I could say about anyone. And then I started looking back. Okay, if there's a problem with everyone, then the problem is with me. So that's how it went for me. But then everybody expresses themselves differently. I've gone through a period where I've kept quiet, and that's a very, very difficult period altogether, because you have all these pent up emotions waiting to get out, and you don't know what to do. You also have this feeling that what are people going to think about you? They're going to judge you. Now this I'm 10 years down the line, right? There's a lot of shift in focus. People are talking about depression and talking about how you feel. It wasn't like that before. Nobody talked about any of those mental health issues. And I come from India, and there's a lot of stigma attached to it. I mean, things work a little differently here. You can reach out to help, Lifeline. A lot of people are here to support you, and you're not judged for speaking about these issues. So that's where I'm coming from. But you said, how did you finally reach out to somebody or talk about it? How did you get around talking about it? I've also seen this in men. They don't express themselves as well as we do. So let me put that question back to you and ask, what made you talk about it eventually?
Uh, I just found that my usual work output wasn't the same. I found that I was kind of sitting there looking for things to do, and even though I had a massive backlog of work to do, um, I just felt like I couldn't get started in it to get things done. And I knew I was perfectly capable of it, but I was afraid of stuffing it up. And because of the amount of work that we've got in our workplace at the moment, that any kind of additional work would cause more work and more slowness and more unhappiness around the office and all that kind of stuff. And I just didn't want to contribute to that. Like, our offices are very much a firefighting kind of place. So for me to stuff things up, it's like adding more petrol to the fire and making the fire bigger. And my role there is to take some of that fire away, and I didn't want to do the opposite. So last week, there was kind of every week on a Tuesday, we have a workplace psychologist comes in, and you can just nominate a session and everything else. And I arrived late last week, and I didn't get to book in. And I thought, this week, bang, I'm going to go in. And I'm kind of glad I did, because even though I was talking everything out and I've got my own mental health background and everything else, I still can't troubleshoot myself. So when I was talking it out to another person, they were able to give me that reflection that I was looking for. But it also, because I had that person there and I had to verbalize it, it enabled me to go, okay, all right. When I'm talking it out, I can hear exactly what I'm doing and what I need to do differently. So one of the things at the moment was just this sense of not being able to do things was just I wasn't reaching out for help. And during this period, I should be actually celebrating being in the workplace because it's coming up to a year of being there and everything else. And instead, because of all of these changes, I wasn't thinking about celebrating. I was actually thinking about, oh, I'm dropping the ball here and I'm just making it worse for everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that talking about it just reinvigorated me for the rest of the day, because I got that person there to reframe it for me, and I could figure out what I needed to do next. Like I still couldn't change my output. I still need to ask for help, to be able to be able to feel like I'm not going to throw more petrol on the fire. But yeah, it was good.
Self doubt is sometimes killing, right? In every way. The can you have the ability to do things, but then when you're going through all this and when you're overwhelmed by 100 different things, then self doubts different definitely kills you, and then you feel that are you good enough for your job? Are you doing as well as the other person? And we don't have to compare ourselves to anyone else. Uh,
Yeah,
and Have you experienced a situation where you're frustrated because nobody is appreciating what you do? Um,
yeah,
and
and yeah. Like there was a period a couple of years ago where I was in a workplace and I felt like I was putting in absolutely everything. And yet every single week I was sitting in a meeting going, why haven't you done this? And why haven't you done that? And I felt like I was hitting 99%. 90, I even came up with stats one day because it was writing out like um, a specification. So I was like, this specification, based on the errors that you've given me and the amount of output that I've done, this specification is actually 98% correct. But yet I'm sitting here in a meeting with you and you're telling me that it's not good enough because there's a 2% correction that needs to be done. And that was like going on. It went for over a period of 18 months. And by
wow.
the time of that 18 months, I was broken. It broke me for the next 3 years. And just like you, I needed to take a break. I needed to get out of it. And that's what led me to here in mental health and everything else. So um, sometimes stuff like that, the out the journey is bad, but the outcome may be positive because you learn from that experience. Like you mentioned before, um, when you went through that burnout and you realized that everything was going bad, and then you went, if everything's bad, maybe it's me. That self-reflection probably has made you such a different person today. And when you need to call on that resilience, I reckon you'd be a total different person, like going through uh, a difficult situation. Suddenly you're pulling new tools out of your box that you have found due to that journey that you've been on.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in this theory, right? I mean, how silly this sounds. What doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. It's just that sometimes when everything is overwhelming you, you just lament the fact that your strength is broken. It's happened to me in spite of all that I've learned. And I think this is going to be a journey for me. It's going to be, every incident in my life is going to teach me something, as long as I'm willing to take a step back and look at it and learn from it. So today something's gonna, I mean, my interactions with you, now I've gotten a slightly different perspective too. So that's in again, that's something that I'll store for future use. But then there are times that you need to actually go back and see what, and it does the same thing doesn't work for you all the time. So you have to invent, and then I read books, and actually my speaking with people also, it helps me a lot. If somebody gives me a different tool, somebody told me to write down how I feel. And this comes from, I think, Deepak Chopra's, I don't know the book name, but there's a reference there. So, to write the imaginary letter. So I was a bit skeptical at first, and then it took me 3 months to write a letter. And that's not me. I love writing. But then it took me 3 months to write a letter about how I feel, and, the letter you don't send. So I wrote it down. And once I finished writing, I read through what I wrote down. It was a very emotional experience for me. But then after that, I even symbolically went around and burnt it. I'm very thankful for the person who told this to me. Very, very thankful. And I haven't had, I haven't met her after that, but very thankful because it is very symbolic, but it helped me too. I just burnt the letter, and I was dealt with all those emotions that were troubling me for a long time. So now, if you ask me to write a letter and do, okay, I feel bad about Jason, write a letter and throw it in the bin, it's not going to work. I mean, I'm going to have a different strategy. If I don't agree with you, I would rather have a conversation with you. But then,
Yeah.
what I've learned is, the tools, and you have this collection of tools. Also, right? Let me come back to this conversation a bit later. But what I'm going to try and say now is, we've been told a lot of different things about grieving. In the past, what I would say is, anything for that matter. When I talk about burnout, I also want to touch upon burnout from your personal experiences as well, because there's a lot of focus on occupational burnout. But I see this, in all of some of your personal experiences also can lead to burnout when you're
Yeah.
waking up every day, and then you just think that it's the same shit again. That's not how you want to live your life, and that's not, it's not enough for you to get out of the bed. I've had that experience too, and I've had people talk about it. So when it comes to this sort of thing, right, you can't just say, "Oh, okay, snap out of it," or "Don't grieve about it." For me, coming out of things has, you help. The way it has helped me is I have had to deal with the grief. I've had to face it head on. I can't say everything is good and then just go. It never worked for me. There's this lot of pent up emotions, and I'm crying all through the day, and I'm trying to snap out of it. It's not working. So that's another thing that I learned. A bit of the self-help books, and that also, I see that it's not everyone's cup of tea. Reading is not everyone's cup of tea, but there are hundreds of other things out there. The podcasts, there's Jason talking every day on does it mess with your mind. Listen to it, maybe you'll get a different perspective. I mean, but yeah, what is your go-to thing, Jason? Like, if you're having a rough day and you think that things are going in a certain way, or a pattern, you see a pattern. I mean, you see patterns. This is how I work. Okay, I see
Yeah.
patterns and numbers and a lot of things. So, how do you get out of that? Kind of a vicious cycle.
For me these days, it's listening to different podcasts myself. So one of the big ones that I listen to is Hidden Brain, and they talk a lot about the way how the mind works, and I find that like really useful because the way how the mind does work is it works in cycles, and sometimes when you're stuck in those kind of cycles, the cycle reinforces itself. And knowing how the cycle is exactly working, and sometimes the obvious thing to do is actually to be opposite of what you think you should do, and that's what gets you out. Um, and then also taking the time out to be reflective, like you mentioned before. You had to take that time and you had to reflect and you had to write the letter. And I wanted to emphasize before, when you talked about writing that letter, us in our own head, when we're not feeling good and we're in our own head and we're talking, we tend to talk really fast and we tend to jump from idea to idea to idea. You having to slow down and write out that letter actually makes your brain have to process at the speed of you writing, which is really good at coaching, because you can't coach someone speaking at a million miles per hour like your brain does to yourself. So if you're out there and you're actually feeling like really stressed out, make sure that you talk it out to yourself or you write it out, something to slow your brain down. So that way you can actually coach yourself through it. If you can't talk to someone else, or you don't feel like you can talk to someone else, that's a good way of working through it. I would recommend you actually talk to someone, someone you trust, Lifeline, your workplace EAP, something like that, because those services are there for you. That's what I use today. Um, yeah, and then the other thing that you mentioned as well was whatever doesn't kill you make you stronger. But what you were going through at that point in time was actually killing you and not making you stronger. It wasn't until you actually stopped, and you reflected and you used those tools that you're actually able to rebuild rather than become stronger, which is the way how I would put it. And now I would say, judging by what you're going through at the moment, I mean, you're working on some really cool things and you're really happy about it.
Yes.
What was it? What is it now that you feel is different within yourself that you can absorb these same stresses, but you're happy about it?
One is I know what led me to have a burnout.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one. Second thing is tell you something very simple. The other day you told me, "Oh, you're leading yourself to a burnout." And like, I have friends who remind me. Okay,
Yeah.
so I know how to take a step back, and I know that I love working. That is who I am. But I also know that I need to find time for myself. So I'm kind of enabled, be it friends. I have a very good support network. I make sure that find time for socializing. Now, this is another important fact that I've found. Vacations. There, I can't stress the importance of vacations. Vacations are really, really important. You come back, you refresh yourself. You've had time to do something else, and you're out in the open. You're breathing some fresh air. All these things do wonders for you. Does wonders for your physical sense of well-being too. That's another thing. Exercising. So I found that this makes me happy too. It's all the,
Endorphins.
endorphins. I'm looking for the word.
Yeah.
And the endorphins rushing through you. I found exercise is really, really good. Eating healthy. This is another thing. So this also, helps with dealing with things. But yeah, so I always take a step back when I see that I'm going into the same pattern and I'm gonna, get burnt out again. I actually take a step back, and I've seen that it doesn't affect my job or what I do. It actually helps me. It helps me focus. It helps me be more productive. And when I'm more productive, the self doubts don't come into picture at all. And yes, I can also motivate myself. But yeah, I think I'm enabled now. I mean, the simple fact that I know what I went through is in itself enabling. So sometimes things are wrong, and you know that you keep wondering if you've become a very bad person. These self doubts are like really, really. I mean, it literally kills you up for me from inside, and your mental well being manifests as physical well being too. So sometimes it's in your headaches or every other. I mean, I've had joint aches, and I think some of it is imaginary from all the stress I've put myself through. And if you look at even the definition of burnout, right, it is repetitive stress.
Yeah. And what is it that is burning out? It's your brain, and your brain is what controls putting cortisol through your body, and your cortisol is a stress hormone. So why wouldn't you have joint pains or headaches or high blood pressure, all of those different kind of things? Why wouldn't you feel fatigued when your brain is stressed out? It's going to send stress signals everywhere as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. Oh, that's another thing I read about. But yeah, that should be, I think, a conversation probably for another day.
Yeah.
I read a book about this as well,
Yeah.
about cortisol and adrenaline and other things, and how these things get, there's an unbalance when there's a lot of stress. So I won't get into the medical side of things simply because
Yeah.
I'm not qualified, but you can see the impacts. You just have to pause and see. You know what stress is doing to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll leave it there tonight. It has been a really good conversation. Do you want to come back next week and we'll talk about that self-doubt, and we'll talk about exercise, and what was the other thing you mentioned?
Vacations?
Yes, exercise and vacations and how they actually work. Oh, no, it was eating healthy, because I
Oh,
wanted to talk about how exercise helps clear the mind, because you can't really exercise and talk in your brain, especially if you're jogging or something like that. It's really hard to do because you tend to need to focus on what you're doing. And with the eating healthy, you have to make things. So you've got to go through a process, and you've got to be focused on exactly what you're doing when you're eating healthy. And sometimes that going through that process is reinforcing of you achieving something. Want to come back and talk about that next week?
Definitely. I'll add one more to the list, hobbies.
Hobbies, yes. Right.
I,
I shall write
I,
them all down.
it's something that you think is silly, but it's that's important too. It's really important.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you are feeling workplace burnout, I would recommend that you reach out to your EAP, or if you don't have one, Lifeline, communicating with a friend, someone you trust. Just start talking about it, even if you start small and you build bigger later on. But it will help if you just start talking about it. If you would like to reach out with any kind of comments, or you want to let us know how we're going, you can do it via the MYND Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn, or just hit us up in the YouTube comments. Thank you all for joining us. Ashita, thank you very much.
Oh, you're most welcome. Looking forward to the next one.